with the coffee. We got the green going again this morning. It's fun being green or whatever it says on the other side. How we doing there, Trevor? What we got going? Oh, you show me, show the audience, baby.
Oh yeah, I've decided to channel my inner Macca, and I'm going with a beer this morning it's a local one called Crazy Space World, because we are currently living in a crazy space world when it comes to Liverpool Football Club. So I figured I'd just do it justice and bring everything together and make it the story continuity as best as I can make it.
Well, I honestly, like after the City game, we might be doing shots over here Monday morning.
Oh, yeah.
Bring a bottle each. Forget the headline.
I'll keep my liver ready.
Have you recovered from the weekend? We never got a chance to talk.
Yeah. I'm lucky that I had you guys to kind of just be that buffer, so I could kind of just watch it on my own and try to just compartmentalize all the anger and frustration and everything that came with that game, just top to bottom. Our performance, the refereeing, the letters of the law, all of the nuance in between, just a lot to process, and a lot of it was bad, but I'm pushing through it, and why not?
Alan is with us again this morning. Good morning, Alan. Yeah, it's been I mean, like you said, we talked about it a lot yesterday on the podcast. And you know what the funny thing is, after we record the regular podcast, we also record the Premier League show, which should be airing like tomorrow or Wednesday on American Scouser TV. And I had to, we kind of recap each game. It's try to be a bit more objective, but still, obviously, it's pretty clear that I'm a Liverpool fan, and the same thing with Gally. So we had to talk about it again, and we had to also talk about how good City looks and stuff. And then the match of the week next week is going to be City and us, and that's kind of just bad. Alan says stressed by bad refereeing performance, failed VAR, and had to get my lab work done yesterday afternoon. Yeah, that's just way too much. It's pretty bad when the lab work probably was the most fun out of all those things. I hope everything turned out great, but it's just, I know the whole refereeing thing, we went into it a lot yesterday. It's just like frustrating how poorly it is executed. I mean, you have all this freaking technology, but I think you made a good analogy with like the strike zone, which I hate talking about baseball, but you know what? We'll do it just for you here. I mean, it is kind of like that where they made it more and more subjective. And it's almost like every time they add a rule, you would think, I expect the rule to make things even clearer. And it's not. The handball, actually, even maybe if you're going to go to American sports analogy, the handball rule, especially in the box, has been more like what NFL had for a while for what is a catch, because nobody could decide what a catch was.
Yep.
And instead of making things clearer, they're almost like putting more complicated wording to make it an even more gray area.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with what Bickler was saying last night. Is I think now this is all.
Now I know you're drinking beer. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, trust me. It fits the character of the morning altogether, because I truly think, and it's a bit tinfoil hat, but there's so much vitriol in these leagues spewed at referees for the work they do, and instead of making it easier for them, I think these leagues and these governing bodies are just making it easier for them to just wriggle away from bad calls, instead of just having some accountability and going, all right, I messed this up. This is something that I just need to deal with next time. When I'm especially dealing with these two teams, I know to look at this in this specific. Why do I even try to use
the beer?
I screw it up every time. It's a hurdle that I just run into. Nevertheless, it's something where they try to keep it intentionally gray so that you can never be wrong. And that's not good. That's not getting it right. That's just making sure. It's the difference between being incorrect and being wrong. Like getting a question wrong on a test and being incorrect, there's two vastly different paths you can go down there, and they'd rather them just, instead of getting it right, just make sure they don't get it wrong. and I feel that's really just a
You know what it
bad
reminds
precedent.
me of is, but the thing I didn't understand, and like I said, that's what I was saying yesterday too. Like, why would the refs be okay with that? They're like, why don't you guys go? Because it puts the refs in a bad situation. It just reminds me of, when I was in management and you talk to the legal department. First of all, when the legal department stopped emailing back and forth, and they were like, "Hey, good morning, Diaz." The legal department would pick up the phone. It's not good because they don't want it in written format now. And then they would just kind of like throw it on your thing. It's like, well, it's your thing. Ultimately, you make the decision, so that whatever decision I make, I will be wrong. And because there's no, like, you're not giving me any parameters. You're not telling me what to do because,
Yeah.
legal can't tell you what to do, kind of a thing. It kind of reminds me of that, where they made these gray areas. But if I'm on the other side of things, like I say, I just would not be happy with that, because it's hard for me to evaluate myself. B, I'm constantly fighting those battles because you left the gray area here. I can never be right. But I guess goes back to what you're saying. You can never be wrong at the same time. So I guess it helps in that sense. Also, you can never be wrong when you say, hey, we must have some injuries. So,
Oh yeah. Not a false
Diaz
statement at all
out
this year.
for freaking forever. Well, basically for the rest of the year. We're not gonna see him after the World Cup, and I don't know how soon we will see him right after the World Cup. They're saying like 10 games, about like 6 to 8 weeks or whatever. But so we find out later on that it's Matip has his traditional calf injury, which, here's the thing, I feel like we played him to death, and that was about to happen, and it did happen now, because I mean, we kind of know, right? You have to kind of manage his minutes, if you will. And obviously Trent, which, they're both going to be out a couple of weeks. For Trent, I thought it was going to be longer, the way that looked and the way it
Yeah.
happened when you look at the still photos and stuff. So where does that leave us? Which slot is Gomez going to fill? The right back, I assume.
I think at least for the short term, Gomez has to go outright, because until either they're ready to let Ramsey loose, or pull up one of these kids from the youth team, or God forbid run Milner out there right back for 90 minutes, that it's just he's the only guy that has significant experience in England at that position who's had any semblance of success. And granted, we've all really pigpiled on Gomez in a lot of spots just because he's not had the cleanest of records in terms of closing down guys centrally. Maybe if we cut off the field and let him just not have as much to worry about, it'll be a little better.
Yeah, Daz says, please give me Gomez, Konate, VVD, and Robo. Is Robo gonna be? He's back at practice, so I guess he might be. I don't know if that's
He's
when you
yeah.
trot him
I said
out.
he was like 50-50 for City. He's out for Rangers.
See, that means he's definitely not going to start against City, because I felt like, if he was able to come in the last 20 minutes or something like that on Thursday, then you're like, oh, okay, maybe he'll make it. I mean, on Wednesday. I don't know why I keep saying this is Thursday.
You're
But
just trying to
get
prepare
ready.
yourself for when we're possibly playing on
Yeah,
Thursdays
let's
in
let's not
January.
let's not
And
go there. That would
yeah,
really mess up the
a
schedules.
Freudian
I
slip
already
that
have
we
one
all
team playing
don't
on
want to come
Thursday.
true.
So I asked this to the boys yesterday. Let me run it by you, get your reaction, because I got like the crazy eyes going from the guys. But and I don't think Klopp would do this, but if you were going to say, hey, you know what, we want to keep Gomez for the City game, we don't want to try out this four that Daz is asking for, which in an ideal world, yeah. Do you put Ramsey in tomorrow, knowing he's probably the most familiar at playing in that park, and to the atmosphere and stuff like that coming from that league?
I personally think if there's any time to get him, it's in the Rangers game. Even though if you go back and look at his time with Aberdeen, he started there once and was mediocre, and then he came on as a sub another time and was absolutely bullied in about 10 minutes and had like 6 giveaways in 10 minutes, and you're going, oh boy. So, and granted, now he's got a bit more help behind him than what Aberdeen could provide. But it's something where if he's healthy and you're planning on using him in any fashion outside cups, tomorrow is the time to do it. I just don't think he will. And I personally, just giving his familiarity, but also his track record with Rangers, who were at a lesser level last season, just because they were competing on all fronts and were all beat up, and he still went out there and got just absolutely handled.
Yeah, I think it goes to what you're saying as well, though. I mean, the people around you, they're not going to be able to come at your sides or, attack that much. I don't know if we're going to see, that's going to be interesting to see. And we'll probably talk a lot more about that tomorrow morning as well. But are they going to really come at us because they're home? Or is it going to be more of the same, but maybe a slightly more brave than they were at Anfield? Because in Anfield, they were just like, they were all parked back there, and they had no intention of even. It looked like they didn't even try to counter. They were just like booting it away, where we would just get the ball, come back again, wave after wave. So I don't know why they would do that again. And I don't know if the home crowd would let them do that, or more like push them to come out, and that kind of like works for us. But yeah, how about the front over here with Diaz coming out? What are you doing? I mean, are you changing the formation back to where it was? If you're keeping the 4-2-3-1, how are you feeling Diaz a spot?
Yeah, I think just personnel wise, and I said this ahead of this weekend that if we're gonna run the 4-2-3-1, that Hendo and Thiago were my ideal too, just because I felt they could get the ball from the back and get the ball forward quicker than any other pair. And what Arsenal game showed is, all right, they were able to get those quick fire passes out and as accurate as they were because they were under no pressure. And in the second that Arsenal put pressure on them, that unit completely fell apart. So I think Klopp is just too scared to run the 4-2-3-1 again. I don't want to call him a supremely fearful man, but I think it's something where, yeah, you saw it work and then you tried it again and it didn't. So this is him just going, hey, you all clamored for this and you just wouldn't shut up about it. We did it. It worked once against a bad team. It didn't work against a good team. So we're going to go back to the way I want to do it. And I think he's going to go back to the 4-3-3. And so up front, as you're asking, as much as I want to give Bobby the credit for the form he's in, I still think they're going to run Nunez up middle, Mo outright, and probably Jota left, just so they have a little bit of depth off the bench with Bobby and Harvey.
I guess that leaves you depth to bring in. I still think, I mean, really, it wasn't the formation. It was more about execution, I thought, against Arsenal. Like, especially those two. I mean, the first goal, I don't know what they're doing. So I think, but here's the problem. Like, especially when it comes to Thiago, it's like Matip. I think we play them. You kind of like rolling the dice here. And I know we're almost at, middle of October. It's going to be World Cup anyway, but you're like, another 30 minutes, 60 minutes away from Thiago getting a muscle injury from being trotted out there like every single game. I really thought it would be Fab. I thought it was going to be Fab and Hendo because it's a bit more like, I mean, I hope it's Fab, for example, coming up this weekend. Who's actually another player that can play right back if needed because he did it for Brazil. I know it was a different style and everything.
Yeah, he did it in Monaco too
for a long time. It's just, I still think Nunez, you got to keep Nunez in there. And I feel, because I think he did a lot of good things. And this team has to get used to playing with the guy because he's making, I mean, I said this on the podcast yesterday. I think he's making a lot of runs that are being wasted and, not seen right away. And, he gets to release too late. It's almost like the team is not used to his pace, used to his runs. And that's going to take some time. And that's only going to happen by playing more. But it's hard to keep Bobby on the side in the form he has. So I really would want to see that, especially against Rangers. I think it's kind of like a too risky of a premise to do that against City. And I really think you will not see Nunez against City. It would be more like the pressing gang. But now we're shorthanded too, so I don't know. The pressing gang has really dwindled because you had Diaz on the left. I mean, you can put Jota on the left, like you said, and he can press, and Bobby in the middle, and then Mo on the right. What do you say about Mo? I see a lot of, like you say, I think the fan base always picks like certain players to kind of like constantly go at, and then everybody gets like a pass. And Mo, obviously, with the contract and the money and stuff, he, I'm sure, knew that this was coming anyway. If he didn't perform, he was going to get the criticism. Is it Mo? Is it the system? What is going wrong, or is it just heck, everything is going wrong? Why shouldn't that one too?
Yeah, and it happens with every fan base, every team, that there's tactical anger, guys that get uh, passes even though they are in bad form, and guys that have one bad 15-minute spell and they are the son of Satan and need to be cast into the sun. It's something that I genuinely have no idea how to fix Mo right now, and what ways that they could utilize him to kind of get him back on track. I don't think it's a money thing, because it's something where if it was he got paid and then he didn't care anymore, he wouldn't be out there bombing up down the sides like a banshee trying to get every crappily diagonal ball to him. And you just there's a lot of it right now where there's just a lot of
Every
times
left
where
back that plays against us must have like a massive headache at the end from cutting off those balls with a header. Just
it's something where you just see him, and you try to, like, and especially with some of these camera angles, you see him just getting ready, like in the blocks to go. He sees the pass coming, and then he just the like yesterday, and it was happening with both guys when Diaz was on the field. Tomiyasu from Arsenal was a guy who's kind of like praised for his fitness, but you could see him just absolutely done with it in about 15 minutes of just, I'm sick of having to chase these looping balls like I'm playing a Sam Allardyce team every time. I'm over it. Please, can we just stop these guys from making these passes and me having to do wind sprints like I'm at soccer camp and I'm 9? And yeah, I just, back full circle. Maybe you have to keep the 4-2-3-1 against lesser teams and let Mo cook with a bit more space so he can get some goals. But they kind of tried to let him cook against Bournemouth, and they put in 9 and he didn't put in any. So I genuinely have no idea what to do with Mo.
yeah, it's bad because, and then it feels like when he does eventually get the ball and when he give him the ball, I mean, there's always one person in front and then another one waiting slightly behind, which is, kind of like how you defend a guy like that. And I feel like his usually outlets from that situation is not there anymore. Or, when he plays that pass back to Trent's crosses are not what they were. I guess the only good thing is we're not going to have to hear about Trent's defending. Now we'll just pick on.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel bad for Gomez because he's just.
We're going to have to bitch at Gomez's defense.
Oh, yeah. He's just being like strolled out there like, this is the new guy to bash on right here. Like anything that goes wrong on defense, it's him. Just pick on him. And I feel bad for him like coming out. But I mean, like I say, I think he got a raw deal in the Napoli game that he was yanked. And let's see, Alan says bring back Nat Phillips, and honestly,
be playing Ben Davies on Wednesday.
Yeah, he'll be on the other side. But I don't know when Nat Phillips will make an appearance because now you're gonna be playing Konate a lot, who just came back from injury. With Van Dijk, who just looks like needs a freaking vacation or something to get back to kind of. I mean, I don't know what it is. And it's kind of like, it's hard to look at individuals because when you look at collectively, it's shit. But it's not like, there's so many decent performances and like bad ones are sticking out. It looks like everybody's off a step, which is kind of. obviously
Not
brings up
helpful.
the collective crap that we've been seeing. But and honestly, like the first half, like we were talking yesterday, I thought we afterwards got to control the game, and then that, I mean, it's just like a boneheaded defending by Trent. But even before it gets there, you get at least 2 shots to just take a foul. It's probably a yellow, but just take a foul, take the yellow. I mean, anybody who plays FIFA knows the 45th minute is the most dangerous minutes. I call it the 45th minute miracle, right? Like anything you shoot goes in. So it was like, it's the 45th minutes. You're going to go into the halftime, take the yellow or whatever it is. Maybe you will get away without it. If it's like a midfield foul, like trying to look for going for the ball or whatever. And then we kind of close out that half, having kind of weathered the storm and evened out the game. Will the second half be the same way? I don't know, because you kind of go into the halftime demoralized as opposed to, okay, we got this back. It's under control. Because we did seem to have the game under control for maybe like a 15-20 minute period there. More the ball is more with Thiago. We're kind of like doing some things, but it's just that goal kind of like put us all behind the 8 ball, and then the second half comes out. I mean, really, even I know everybody complains about the penalty. I still say that's a penalty, soft or not. Jesus buys it or not. It is what it is, but it's still a penalty. It's contact. So I can see it given, and I would be pissed if it was not given against Mo or somebody like that in the box, because I would say, hey, you see freaking contact there. But it looked like they were about to score any minute. It wasn't like, oh, it was against the run of play or something like that. We were kind of defending for our lives, hence we couldn't freaking clear the ball properly, like in multiple chances over there and inviting that pressure. But let's look at a couple of headlines over here. Griezmann joins Atletico Madrid from Barcelona. So, go back to start. Do not collect. Well, he collected a lot of 200s, 2000s along the way. But what do you make of that? I mean, obviously, Atletico needs help for one. But I mean, that whole fiasco Barcelona basically is getting 20 for him. I think they were originally asking 40. So they gave like a 50% off clearance. All these bad transfers must go kind of thing. What do you make of that? Is like Barcelona dumps a lot of money on this guy and he really never panned out.
Yeah, it was the triumvirate of terror of Coutinho, Dembele, and Griezmann that came in all for 100 million plus, and none of them have really done anything there. And then each one had their kind of spurts in kind of I want to say lesser areas with the club, but it's an era that they are putting behind them. And when you look at everything that they have at their disposal in terms of that whole setup and the way they still find themselves in financial ruin is just mind-boggling to me. And whatever they can do to recoup some of those losses, whether it be a cut rate sale or making a loan permanent and doing stuff like that, you gotta get there somehow. And if they can pull in people for like 5 million, kind of the way they're trying to rebuild their midfield with these youngsters, go for it. Because the way that they've spent the summer in both defense and attack, it makes me believe that we're gonna
There's
be back.
so much
We're gonna be
shadiness
back at
going
the
on there. It's
same
not even funny.
conversation in like 2 years, where they're going, "Oh God, we have to find a way to get rid of Kunde. He hasn't played 3 straight games, and he's making 25 million a year with an escalator in his contract or something weird." And
I mean, they got all these guys that it almost feels like a Barcelona garage sale, right? Like you're like, how much you want for this guy? They're like 40. I know, thanks. How much you gonna give? Like, well, I don't want to pack these back up. Like, put them back in the training ground. They're like, I'll give you 24 Griezmann. I mean, honestly, it's a good deal. Just 20 million for Antonio Griezmann is probably a pretty darn good deal, especially for a team who needs him. And honestly, he's still a good player. He just never fit there, and he will have like a point to prove when he goes back. And I think it's a good deal. But it just shows. I mean, that whole Barcelona money. They don't have money, but they do. They borrow from themselves to pay themselves. All kinds of bullshit like that. Is, those two teams get away with murder in Spain, and then obviously it kind of like translates into what we have to deal with financially too. Yeah, and what we compete against when it comes to, like, Champions League and stuff. One thing we didn't get to last night, and mainly because there was not a lot of information, and I woke up this morning expecting more information, but I got even less, is that whole Henderson incident, the FA reviewing it, who said what, who did what, who slept who, kind of an ordeal. And does the lack of information say there is not much, or does a lack of information say there's a bunch, but they want to get it right before they get it out because he is the co-captain of the national team?
Yeah, that what you guys were talking about last night was a big part of it, of just how out of character it was for Henderson to even have one of those incidents pointed at him at all. But you could see when they were having that scuffle around the penalty that it was something that was definitely coming from him, because that was where everybody was trying to like get to, especially Xhaka was trying to get to Hendo. And
which, anytime there's a fight, you don't even have to send an invitation to Xhaka. He can just fucking smell it and come over there. But
yeah, that it's kind of par for the course. It was very in character for Xhaka to trying to get a scrap on, but if it's what is being put out there, kind of speculated of his comments towards Thomas Partey, I grant in the heat of the battle, as long as what you're saying isn't, let me just put it into the very wide brackets of hate speech. If you're not coming at him with homophobic slurs or racial slurs, or really going into any like family turmoil or something like that, stuff that really should be out of bounds when it comes to even banter. But if the things that is being speculated, as he said, I don't feel as sympathetic towards Partey, because that's something that he really put himself in the spotlight for in a very, very negative light. And if it's something that was said in the heat of the battle and it was that, okay, it's horrible, and maybe give Hendo a couple games to think about it, whether it be a team suspension, a league suspension, whatever, because it's still, you don't want to have that pick and choose what you can say, what you can't. If you're trying to like make it so everybody has to play under the same rules, great. But it's something where I don't feel that there should be like a lengthy investigation or anything like that. If it was kind of something different and they're just trying to gloss over it right now to kind of keep Hendo's image a bit more sparkly ahead of the World Cup, then that itself is a problem. And yeah, and this is going back to like the whole Indonesian collapse thing. And I don't want to, they're very apples and oranges, but the fact that the information is being released so slowly on these cases don't give us the necessary capital to kind of go at it and provide informed opinions. So right now it's all just kind of, we're not even throwing darts at the board. We're just kind of like throwing it at our random things on the wall and hoping that the shopping list that we hit, it hits the right word. You don't know really what you're doing. So let's just hope for the best.
I mean, honestly, here's the thing. I mean, we're discussing this I think on the Discord channel with Gally. I mean, I don't agree that, he's the captain, so he should not be. Sometimes you do that. I mean, you gotta either, sticking up for your team, or that sometimes you use that thing to wake up the team and bring the team together. I mean, as a captain, it is sometimes, what you do. And I think it shows the reaction of the team more shows, how unified the team is. I think, we figured like, it's probably like a longer discussion, so we never went into it on the podcast. But I feel like a captain doesn't mean the captain is always going to be like the peacekeeper. Sometimes he's going to be the one in your face and letting everybody else know he's there, and like to kind of like lead the team, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So I was totally okay with that. I mean, I always go back to the glory days when we were like whipping United at Old Trafford, and when Ronaldo basically kicks at Curtis Jones, like on that, like right by the goal line over there, the reaction you get, I mean, that's something that's done with frustration, but that's something that's also done for Ronaldo. That's something done to wake everybody else up instead of, saying you guys got to be freaking mad too. And the reaction you saw afterwards, where entire Liverpool team comes over and your freaking, your captain and your co-captain, like Van Dijk and stuff like that, get in his face and talk shit to him, while the United players are still like, what's going on over there? They're like, meh, like only a couple of them come over, was showing how unified those two teams, how everybody was on the same page at that time, I think. And we talked about it way back then in terms of, it shows unity within the team where everybody's, protect your brother kind of deal. And so I was totally okay with them doing that. And like I say, maybe I have like extra sympathy because I've said some shit on the field afterwards where I was like, oh, I was a little out there. But, like I say, if you don't have racist stuff or homophobic stuff in your vocabulary, it doesn't just suddenly out of nowhere come out when you get mad. If it came out, that usually means you were probably using those words. I've never started like saying stuff like that because I don't say it normally. I've said like, maybe I've sworn or like I said some shit like maybe got a bit too personal, blah, 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 that I was like, whew, that was a little out there. But I mean, A, I really felt bad for it. And B, it's kind of like happens. It is what it is. It's like the heat of the moment. And just the fact that Arteta kind of said, oh, it stays on the pitch, tells me Arteta is not going to say like, oh, racism stays on the pitch. Just like, so I don't see that. That's why it just feels like, like the whole party calling him a rapist or whatever could be it. Because I'm sure Arteta doesn't want to bring attention to that either. You know what? They just said it. Let's get it done and over with and walk away from it. He's just happy that his Lego head walked away with 3 points more than anything else. So it's time for the second cup of Joe for me. I don't know if you're going to keep going with the beers over there. Knocking them down.
It's about halfway down. So I'll just finish it off.
But it is a tall can, to be fair. So we'll give you some time on that. Well, Trevor and listeners, thanks as always. We'll be back tomorrow morning to preview the game and talk a bit about that. And obviously, we'll talk about the games that are going to happen today in the Champions League, see if there's any weird scores or headlines and stuff like that. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you guys tomorrow.